Hi, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar on the second wave of influencer marketing, which is brought to you by Traackr and haircare experts Wella in partnership with Cosmetics Business. My name is Julia Ray. I am editor of Cosmetics Business, and I will be your moderator for this session. And it is my huge pleasure to introduce today's speakers, Randall Chinchilla, Global Vice President of Communications with Wella Company, and Nicholas Chabot, Chief Customer Strategy and Partnership Officer at Traackr. Before we get to grips with this webinar's topic, I would like to take the opportunity to mention a few housekeeping details. Firstly, today's webinar will be available on demand if you would like to revisit or share the content at any stage. The last 10 minutes of this 45-minute webinar will be devoted to a Q&A session, and you can send in your questions to be answered by Nicholas and Randall using the box on the screen in front of you. I should add that all questions will be anonymous and put to the experts by myself, so please don't be shy and get those questions sent in. So, what might this second wave of influencer marketing, mentioned in the webinar title, actually look like? To set the scene, the first original wave of influencer marketing was highly experimental, with not a lot of measurement or data involved, and influencers were largely utilized for brand awareness purposes. Often, from the brand side, influencer marketing was viewed as a bit flashy and even expensive, and there was a large gap between VIP influencers and pretty much everybody else. However, we've witnessed influencer marketing move from the experimental to the essential. According to eMarketer, the influencer marketing category will exceed $4 billion this year in the US alone. And the financials aren't the only things that have changed. Consumer behavior has too. So nowadays, people discover, evaluate, and purchase products in the blink of an eye, all while scrolling through their social media feeds. And these same consumers trust influencers. We are also seeing influencers become more diverse. There is greater value in micro and mid-tier influencers, more nuance between influencers and creators, and also better representation. So, against this backdrop, what are brands doing to engage consumers via influencer marketing, and what tools are available to help them? So at this point, I'd like to bring in the experts. So to begin, I'm sure our viewers would like to get to know a bit about you both too. So Randall, maybe to start, tell us about Wella and your specific journey in influencer marketing.
First of all, good afternoon and good morning to our audience, and big thank you to you, Julia, and Nico at Traackr for their kind invitation to join here. I would like to just start talking a little bit about our company. And for that, I'm just gonna come to one slide. Basically, the Wella company as such, the Wella brand was founded actually in 1880 in Germany. So you can say from that standpoint, we're vintage. But the reality is that the company has since been acquired 2 times, and its brands have been acquired first in 2003 by Procter & Gamble. Then they were acquired in 2016 by Coty. And more recently, we were acquired by a private equity, KKR. And basically, we have become an independent organization again since 14 months ago. So you can say in some ways that we are the biggest startup in beauty, so to speak. Our expertise is on the professional category. We also have retail haircare brands, but you would say that our point of difference as a company is that we are extremely focused on winning in the professional and hair beauty markets, and that's a market that is estimated to be $100 billion a year market, of which we represent a portion of around $3 billion by the end of this fiscal year. And I'm happy to say that these 14 months have been extremely successful for us. Last calendar year, our net revenue grew around 24%, despite all the headwinds of COVID. And this year, we're tracking to become a $3 billion company So, which puts us at levels ahead of 2019 or pre-COVID days. So, given everything that is going on, we're pretty satisfied with this journey. Now, at the core of who we are of course, our brands. I'm going to speak about three of them very briefly. Wella Professionals, which is the #1 premium professional color in the planet, and then we also have GHD for Good Hair Day. Which is the #1 premium appliance brand, again, globally. And then OPI, which is our #1 professional nail brand. So a bit about the company. I think we're 6,000 employees who operate in over 100 countries. And I think as it comes to influencer marketing, we are targeting both B2B and B2C, but understanding that we have a strong legacy in B2B because our strongest influencer is the professional, either the hairdresser or the nail technician. And I always like to think about it in the way that when someone goes to the salon, for example, to get their hair color or to get a haircut, eventually they more often than not, they don't even ask for a brand of color per se, but they just use whatever the colorist is going to be using. So in that sense, the #1 influencer for us are professionals historically. But of course, as time has changed and our brands go omni-channel, then we have started more and more to targeting to B2C. So we have that mix. And I think that, I'll just leave it like that because I think we probably can cover other elements of the company later. But in terms of our journey in influencer marketing, I think it's quite, you were quite accurate saying like maybe in 2016, 2015 were really, really early days for us. And influencer marketing as such started for us as a company when we joined Coty, and we established the influencer marketing department, which was also new for Coty at the time. And since we've had a journey that I will be talking through this webinar, it's a journey that is full of learnings, some sour moments, and some success stories. But yeah, so I'll leave it at this so we can move on. But thank you.
Fantastic. Good to know a bit about your operations there. Wonderful. And Nico, for those of us for whom this webinar might be their introduction to Traackr, it's described as a system of record for data-driven influencer marketing. So tell us exactly what that means.
Thank you, and good morning, good afternoon to everyone too. So yeah, just two words about Traackr. So we pride ourselves to power the largest influencer programs in the world. We pride ourselves to work with some of the largest companies that have advanced programs on influencer marketing with a very strong focus on beauty. And we're very proud to be working with Wella for quite a number of years. And also, I think what is specific about Traackr, as an influencer technology, is our global presence. So we have strong operations in the US, but also in Europe, in APAC, and the Wella company has historically some strong operations from Switzerland, for example, where Rundle is based today. But the way we work with Wella is really both by supporting the headquarters and how they pilot the influencer program globally, but also locally. And I'm saying that because this is one of the fundamentals behind the concept of the system of record. And what it means is that, so naturally, Traackr, will enable you to just to search your influencers, organize your campaigns, monitor your campaigns. But the concept of the system of record is really fundamental for these global organizations. Because if you think about it, your influencer marketing program uses multiple sources of data, naturally performance data from the networks, financial information from your system. You will have personal data that you capture when you interact with your influencers. Basically, when you start scaling this program, there's a huge amount of data that sits somewhere in your organization and that you need to organize, to get the full value. Having access to that data is absolutely critical for those brands. Because what does it enable you to do? It enables those brands to optimize their outreach. So making sure that they work with the right people, making sure that they send their samples to the right place, making sure that they have a history of the relationship between the brand and those influencers. Think a little bit of it as a CRM for your influencers, for example. It's also critical for the creators' experience. They want to talk to brands who understand them, who know who they are. It's critical for compliance. Compliance is a key element when you work with influencers at scale for a global organization. And it's also critical when you start scaling your programs, when you want to optimize your investment globally across brands, across country, across teams, and you want to start to have a shared view at global level on how you're performing. So for all this reason, having this central place to bring all of this data together from the brand management, but also from the influencer marketer himself or herself is really critical, and that's what we try to bring to our clients.
Fantastic. And I don't think it's any secret that measuring this remains a challenge for many brands. In a recent survey, 58% said measuring return on investment was one of their biggest challenges. So maybe Randall, how do you at Wella approach influencer marketing measurement?
Well, that's a broad question, Julia. I think I would like to maybe here talk a bit about our journey on influencer marketing, because it's been marked by important moments for us in moving through time. So I've put together this small timeline just to kind of talk about what our journey in general in influencer marketing has been since 2016. And I'm choosing 2016 because that's when we separated from Procter & Gamble. And just suffice it to say, we came from a quite traditional PR structure, heavily reliant on big agencies, traditional PR agencies. And our model was really, in some ways, many occasions, it was having the top spin of PR once everything else on the marketing, the TV copy, et cetera, was in place. What we do with PR. 2016, we established the influencer marketing, I'd say in the context of the divestiture from Procter. But really, there was zero guidance whatsoever. We were all dabbling from that legacy model of more traditional, let's call it analog PR, into more digital PR. And the initial issues and pains that we all had were linked to, well, how do we choose the right influencer? And it was in 2017 that then we crossed paths with Traackr, and we started working with their IRM platform, which was basically an enabler for us to understand better the analytics behind the different types of influencers. That allowed us to become a little bit more sophisticated in our choices. It empowered our team. We started bringing the capability in-house, and we started building and constructing our team internally. And they started, of course, developing the skills. We also made the tool available across 16 markets, and that also, by definition, started developing, also the skills on a broader basis. Move forward to 2018. Something really important happened for us, which is that's when we established earned media as a core performance metric in digital performance of PR for us. And we were using at the time the different source, a different supplier, not Traackr, because Traackr wasn't offering that possibility, or maybe it was, but Nico will correct me. But at the time, we selected just to focus on one metric, earned media, defined in a particular way, and we were reporting on a quarterly basis. And then really things changed around 2019 when that metric became accepted by top management and company-wide as a valid metric for understanding our performance in earned media. And suffice it to say that around that time is when many brands that were launched either by influencers or just by using social media it started popping up. First, I guess, in cosmetics, but then in professional hair, we started noticing that out of the top 10 brands on earned media, right, like 7 of them were brands that had been launched in the past like 3 years or so, right? And Wella wasn't even in the top 10 performing brands on earned media. So we started making that connection, and it became a priority for us to as an organization to make sure that our brands were winning in that space. And therefore, the acceptance of measurement at that point in time of that performance metric at that point in time was a game changer for us as a function, and honestly as a company in many ways on how we do our marketing. I'm not going to fast forward because I think I can pause here in terms of our journey, just to say that as the landscape of influencer marketing, as you were pointing out, in 2015, we're talking about $500 million investment. This year is being projected to hit 16.4 or so, my team's telling me. And then I was recently listening to a podcast that there are projections that by 2027, it might even hit, $100 million all in, right? This is paid influencers, organic influencers, and paid media to support those efforts. So that only tells us that the landscape has become so much more sophisticated, right? And it's daunting because there are like 350 new agencies popping up every year from what I was looking at. I was just glancing at some information before joining here today. And one of the things that is confusing, right? It's like so many choices, so many choices. So the reality, long answer to tell you that, yes, we've been on a journey. It's only gotten more sophisticated. And the most recent step that we've taken is partnering with Traackr's IRM, IMB, sorry, their IMB platform, which is basically a suite of really, a very broad suite of very complex metrics in some ways that we've adopted, and we are consolidating and presenting also in a different, in a more, I guess, it allows us to be more sophisticated in all the choices that we're making. It's a shame that I wanted to show a slide here, but I didn't send it on time. But basically, we're looking at we've selected 9 different metrics that we're focusing on, and then a single one that we use for benchmarking ourselves versus our brands versus other companies. So my apologies for such a long answer, but as you said, I think for us it's been a journey of a few years, and it just continues, right?
As you say, it's amazing how much has changed since 2017, as you were saying. And on a similar note, Nico, as a technology provider to brands in this arena, over the last decade, how has the platform evolved to meet the needs of these more sophisticated programs?
Well, it is interesting to see how the industry has evolved. And a small story. I remember, a few years back already, Randall was one of the first one out there to actually officially take the title of Global Reviewer of Influence. And it's interesting because it is maybe not the first one globally, but it's one of the first VP level, executives that actually was bringing influence in their own title. And I think that's a good, illustration on how the visibility of influence has grown in the industry and in the Wella company. And for us at Traackr, it's been a very interesting journey because, in the initial year, it was a lot about local campaigns going through agencies. And as Randall's explained, Wella has been, progressively integrated, finding a more strategic role for influence, now integrating all their measurements. So that means that the expectations from technology has really changed over time. And it's not just about monitoring your campaign; it's about providing, an integrated measurement tool and enabler for your organization. So, and when you talk about measurement, it's interesting because there's an important question, which is, what do you want to measure? We'll talk about KPIs probably as well, but the question of ask often enough. And Randall just shared it with us very interestingly. He said, well, we didn't realize that some newcomers out there were stealing share of voice from the traditional brands. And you know how brand leadership and brand premium is so critical in these industries. If other brands, newcomers, are able to build their share of voice with your target audience and you don't even know about it, you start to be in a strategic position that becomes weakened. And it's really important, I think, for all the brands to realize that measuring your campaigns is not just enough. It's not enough. Organic mentions, beauty is such a naturally engaging category as well. It's not the case for all the categories, right? If you sell toothpaste, it's a bit more difficult for you to get mentioned organically. But when you talk about skincare, hair care, makeup, you've got so many young men and women who are just naturally engaged in those products. There's just so much activity in the industry. There's so much organic mentions. We estimate at Traackr that 95% of mentions of beauty brands are organic today. It's a huge amount. And you need to understand what's happening out there. And that's the objective of this benchmark technology and tool that we've introduced in the last 2 years and that Randall was referring to. What this tool enables you to do is to really understand how your brand is performing on the market across all the influences, organic and paid, across all the tiers. And it is very important to understand what is the strategic position of your brand, but it's also such a source of insights for the influencer marketer. Because understanding how you're performing versus the market by tier, are you optimizing your tier strategy compared to the market structure and what your competitors are achieving? Are you working on the right platforms? Do you understand what are the new types of content that are emerging in the market? Do you know what are the best performing influencers that maybe you're not working with yet and that some of your competitors are leveraging? So what we find is that access to that benchmark data not only gives you this sort of total market earned media measurement that Mandel was mentioning, but integrating it with your campaign management system also is such a source of insights that I think an increasing number of beauty brands find just irreplaceable.
I mean, they're such important parameters. Fundamentally, how can leaders understand the impact of influencer marketing? How do you go about measuring this?
So, are you taking that, or am I taking that one? Yeah, I think there's a. I think you were saying very well. I mean, I just start with this thought. Before answering the question, which is that influencer marketing, according to recent research, was the only marketing channel, the only marketing vehicle in the marketing mix that did not decrease in growth, in investment during the thick of the pandemic. It's actually the only one that grew. And I think there is a quite an obvious reason for that, which is, people are spending more and more time online, around 6 hours or so. So we need to go and meet people where they are, and they're listening to influencers. So I think for brands, at least in our company, it's almost like I don't recall the last time that I have been in a discussion for annual planning where influencer marketing hasn't been a core of the discussion. Then therefore, everyone wants to know how it pays out. And I think there are perennial metrics out there, some of which I'm not a personal fan, like earned media value, and partly for something that Nicolas was mentioned, which is earned media value, assuming it was right, and I still unclear on how it's measured because it depends on who measures it. Putting a dollar sign or a currency sign on your influencer marketing plans, to me, it doesn't quite cut it. One, I'm not sure how accurate it is. But secondly, and more importantly, the number, if your competition is 3 times bigger than you, and you still don't know what to do with a number, right? And I think the importance of analytics as you start going deeper and deeper and deeper, they allow you to find out what are the different triggers that your competition is pulling, that are making them more successful? What are things that you could be doing? Finding you don't need to do what they're doing, but you need to find your own space. But I believe that your strategies get so much better when you're looking at data. You're not second guessing. You're looking at actual decision making that is based on tangible information. So that's one piece. As to how we measure, I'll say that I was mentioning basically we're looking at 9 different metrics. They range, right, depending on the objectives of any given campaign. So I would not have like a single answer. We will just pop up different elements in terms of whether in one specific campaign we were focusing on engagement or we're focusing on content creation. Then we will pre-select. That is one thing that we try to do, not always do, but we try to be disciplined enough to make sure that the KPIs are set up front. I'm a big fan of that because when measurement is an afterthought, then the intention gets lost because everyone has moved forward. So setting clear vis-a-vis your business objectives, setting up clear, ambitious KPIs up front is going to make your strategy and your execution so much better. And then finally, which is the part that for us remains the next area of evolution in the quality of our programs, and a very important one, which is connected to governance, which is just capturing that investment, understanding the results of any given campaign, and more importantly than that, just having dashboards that allow you to compare campaign to campaign, across different brands and across different geographies. And we are not quite there for different reasons that I will not cover here. But I think that's also a game changer in terms of ROI, because sometimes we are chasing the ROI in many ways, but not in just being more organized and more disciplined in how we track investment. So I think that's a big opportunity for us. Lastly, just because I cannot move away from this, so my team is going to come back to me tomorrow and say, well, what were you doing? It's the DTC. And for us, obviously the ultimate would be, conversion to sales. That's the ultimate. Unfortunately, many of our brands are still not quite there in terms of their journey in being D2C. We do have fantastic success with brands like GHD that have a high percentage of their sales are online and they're growing exponentially. But you see, like the big, whenever you see the big holdings, the Procter & Gamble's of the world, the Unilevers, the types of brands that they're acquiring are brands that are social first. And what that tells you immediately is that, over time, the laggard brands are going to start moving their levels of investment higher and higher in influencer, right? So I guess I was a bit all over the place, but I think we adjust depending on the campaign. We have frustrations because we're still not there on DTC and conversion to sales as much as we wish, but we're making inroads in that space. And I believe that just governance and understanding how you're spending is just a critical part of the success of your campaigns. Just gets everyone on the same page of where you're putting your money across your entire portfolio, and just being mindful of that does make a difference.
Fantastic. As you say, it's Jenny. Nico, do you have anything to add?
I'd like to build on what Wendell says, because there's just a lot of gems in there. I like how you remind us that tracking ROI also starts by tracking investment, and it says without saying, but the reality is that when you're a global organization, tracking where you're investing, how you're investing, and have that capability to consolidate that data and connect it to outcomes is not easy. It doesn't come from your SAP system, right? So how do you do that? So managing that spend is really an important topic, and we're working with Randall to enable the Wella organization to do that. It's interesting to talk about it. And on the return side, I agree with Randall. At the end of the day, what you want to measure are sales or brand lift. Right, and we are the technology enables you now, and Traackr enables you to track all your conversion on your D2C sites, but it's not that easy because a lot of sales go outside of your own, e-commerce channel. So the scope is limited. We're also piloting brand lift. I think brand lift is a measurement tool that brands are increasingly piloting and trying on influencer marketing. And I think that's promising also area of innovation on measurement. But because measuring sales and measuring brand lift is costly and it's only has a limited scope, this is where you have to rely, to rely on the proxies, on the best proxies. And this is where it becomes confusing because you have engagement, you have video views. Not all video views are the same. A video view on TikTok is an impression. Has just appeared on your feed. You really have not seen the video. You're not sure. A video view on YouTube is 30 seconds. So it is very confusing for brands to understand really, what is the value of this proxy and how you connect those proxies to the actual outcome that you're looking at. So that, we've tried to innovate here at Traackr, and we've created our, an aggregated metric that we call brand vitality, or VIT. And the objective of that metric is to create an aggregate that enables the brand to benchmark themselves and also enables the marketers to take better decisions. So to understand how that metric is built, how you can overperform that metric, helps you inform your strategy. And we have some of our important clients that are now also basing their budgets on VIT targets, and everything then comes out of it. So it's still interesting. It's one metric, among others, but it's clear that the measurement around the earned media and the influence marketing is something that is really scaling up, and you really have to think super hard about how you integrate that, your earned media measurement, your spend management, and how do you integrate that, across your teams, across your regions, across your brand, so that you can pilot it centrally and optimize, did you say $100 million, Randall, in a few years?
Yeah, 2027, they say.
Wow.
If you think about the fact that it was $500 million in 2016, 2015, 16 billion now, all in, it's aggressive, but I think companies, start investing, especially, you see how we're in our space, we see it. We see brands that are being launched almost on TikTok, right? Yeah. So obviously the portion of ANCP, the portion of marketing budget that goes into social media and influencer, it has to be over 50%, if not more, right? So I think we're all moving slowly, but surely, in some cases, to 50%, 70%, and then you start doing the math. At 650 million invested in marketing, I think it could be.
Yeah, it really is at the forefront of people's strategies right now. Absolutely. So, Randall, I'm a bit curious because we always talk about, maybe the end consumer's loyalty to the influencer, but Wella has a really strong influencer community, probably one of the strongest I've come across, and it has exceptional influencer loyalty. So what does it actually take to maintain this kind of community of creators and around the world today?
Yeah, thank you. Lots of love and lots of work. I say, well, today we have an estimated footprint of our communities. We say around 45 million, keeping in mind, and that's a combination of B2B, B2C, so of professionals and then consumers. So we have both, depending on the brand. In some cases, some brands have both types of communities. Most of them are organic. And this is something that I was trying to get the number from my team earlier, which is, we launched our first community, the Wella Passionistas, was launched in 2017, and it was 42 Passionistas non-paid creators, but who happen to be hairdressers. And I want to say the reach of that was around like maybe 3 million or so. I don't recall, but it's got to be something like that. So it's something that we knew it was a slow burn. because it requires, when I say love, I mean we have some amazing community managers. We actually have Susan on our team, who's actually a hairdresser. And it took us a while to understand that this is something that we didn't want to outsource. This is something that we wanted to take care of ourselves. And so we created a few roles that are people who actually can look in the eye at these different communities and interact with them. And they know them. They meet in person when that was possible, and hopefully sometime soon. But I think the level of community management, let's call it 2.0, just to keep on that theme, was something that is important. Of course, you cannot scale that infinitely. So that's where tools also help. And also super disciplined about understanding the analytics of these communities. We issue quarterly reports where we look at every community and the performance of every member of that community. And you know, we have a normal rotation cycle, which is natural, on attrition. We bring new people and people go. But the constant has been that it's been an upswing. I think I was almost like, I was really impressed that during the pandemic, of course, I don't know if, for those of you who don't know, the professional community is a very tight community, and that's honestly what inspired us to channel and start organic communities back in the day. Was not that it was a trend; it's that we said, well, how do we put in a small bottle the tightness and the closeness of this community? It has to live online. Online has to be an extension of that. And eventually, during the pandemic, we saw a tremendous acceleration of the interaction in communities because hairdressers were not actually able to, work on hair, be at the salon. So they were looking for education. They were looking for inspiration. They were looking for companionship. And then this network just basically strengthened exponentially. And of course, it's a matter of trust too that you were bringing. So we are not, in this particular case, this is not people that expect to be remunerated. They are just cared differently. They're cared as part of the Wella family, and we give them special care, whatever that means for us, which means access to special events, special education, and so on and so forth. So I think it takes time. It's probably one of the best decisions we've made, if I had to say so. But I say that on behalf of my team and many people who have been supporters of this, because honestly, it's at all levels. This is not an endeavor of one department. It's really beyond that. But what I love is that today our marketing teams don't think about these communities as, oh, the guys from influencer marketing. No, actually, I always see them popping up in their marketing plans unprompted. And actually, one of the issues that we tend to have is that we actually have to push back because we're getting so many requests that we just need to balance the fact that people shouldn't forget that these are people who also have jobs and have things to do. But anyway, we're very proud of these communities, and it's been a long journey, and we still have a lot more to learn and a lot more to do. But yeah, so.
You're absolutely right. Important in the last couple of years, especially with the pandemic, these social communities have become to people working in the industry. Absolutely. So, Nico, beyond brand awareness and affiliate programs, how do you see influencers impacting the businesses of the brands that work with them, and how can brands be more sophisticated here?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, the first impact that those influencers have created is that they've created their own brands. So when you see Kili Cosmetics that has been acquired by Coty, so not too far from where I am, $1 billion, I think. You can see how that has an impact, on the industry. It's not earned media value. It's a real shareholder value here that transaction actually happened. But beyond that, beyond this sort of, you talk about awareness or conversion, for a long time, influencers have been collaborating with brands now about co-branding products, co-building products, or co-creating products. So I think there's a view that these creators can also inform your product strategy. But I've seen two interesting examples, maybe also of influencer contribution. One is on the brand purpose. So it's not just the awareness of the brand or the conversion, but it's also about the brand values and how those creators can help you connect your brand to the purpose and the value that you want and the impact that you want to have on maybe in society. Dove, for example, is a great example of the work that they've done with creators to connect their brand with their purpose. That I think is very interesting because these creators bring their credibility. And sometimes they have been working on these society topics for years, and I think associating your brand with their work can be very, very interesting in that way. And another maybe other example that I think is interesting, maybe not so developed yet, is the impact of influencers on the supply chain. And we've all learned through the pandemics how supply chain can be we've rediscovered supply chains, right? And it's interesting that in some industries, creators are used to get early signals on product appeal and product traction that informs the supply chain. Because when you have a supply chain that is sometimes fairly long and you have all the lead time that can be from 3 to 6 months, having an initial view on the launch of your product and the success is critical so that you can improve your planning and your stock planning. And we've seen some organizations starting to use influencers to get early signals on product traction. And I think that's a really innovative use case around influencer marketing that is I want to share.
Fantastic. Well, thank you both so much for answering my questions. But importantly, we have some great ones here sent in by our audience. And I will get started on these now. So we have somebody asking here, and I imagine this one is probably for Randall. Is TikTok part of your strategy for influencer marketing this year?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think anyone who's influencer marketing has to be looking the TikTok way. We've seen dramatic increase in earned media and video views, while you see pretty much everything else, static posts, etc., on Instagram decreasing. Is Reels the one thing that is popping up as increasing? So we know video is the way in which things are heading on earned media, and TikTok is the big driver behind that. Now there are many questions around it, right? And so we have multiple pilots all over, and we're trying just to make sense of what are our guardrails, what is our guidance. I personally, and I've talked this with my team, which is I don't want to go through Instagram again, because it took us a long while to kind of figure out. Everyone was doing their own thing in their markets, and it took us a while to really get our game together. So we're trying really to make sure that as we're looking at TikTok, we're doing it, that we're testing and learning, fail quick, learn fast. All that's great, but that we're doing it and understanding who's doing what across the entire company so that we can do quick share and reply. But absolutely, yes, it is.
Fantastic. And possibly this one could be answered by either of you, so I'll let you open it out. But we have somebody here asking, how can you select the right influencers to obtain the right audience? And also, why is it important to choose the right influencers? Nico, maybe you want to answer this?
I can take this. So I want to go beyond the sort of the traditional criteria for selecting the right influencers. Is he talking to the right audience? What is the performance, engagement rate, the right content, brand alignment? I think these are topics now that the brands understand relatively well. I think now where the conversations and the topics that brands are looking into are about the influencer mix. So it's not just working with that one influencer, is how do I optimize the tiers of influencers that I'm working with? And what is the balance that I want to have between one certain types of influencers maybe my celebrity influencer that's going to give me that reach, and maybe that more community-led influencer that's going to create that unique content that I can boost, or is going to create my connection with my tight community. So it's really about that, and what is the role of these different audiences? And we see some organizations starting to segment the influencers around, hey, I'm going to use that type of influencers for branding. I'm going to use that type for purpose. I'm going to use that type of influencers more for a new launch and a conversion. It's a new community, so I really want to create content around yoga and fitness. I'm going to go out of my beauty influencer. So I think what is interesting now when you try to think about your right influencer is what is the global objective of the campaign and activity that you're driving, and how does it fit within your overall mix of influencers, and how you want to drive your objective from awareness, conversion, or purpose. So I think having that portfolio view, I think, of the influencers that you're working with is an interesting way to look at it.
And if I may jump in on this one, Julia, because I would like to pair it with the previous one, which is you have what we call our influencer archetypes, which are precisely by tier, like what types of influencers archetypes fit with each of the brands that we have in the portfolio. But also it's connecting back to the TikTok question is not only the complexity of deciding what is your mix of influencers, but then your mix of channels, right? And that also varies depending on the brand, depending on the campaign, and depending on the market. And of course, those are, that makes it, that adds a level of complexity that in my mind requires a rigor in just having the basic guidance provided to the different markets so that they at least have a point of departure when it comes to making those decisions.
Lovely. So I think we have time for maybe one more question, possibly two if we're quick. And I have one here, which I think this probably would be for Randall, which is asking, how are you organized internally for influencer marketing? How do you structure your team? What skills are critical, and how do you hire for this?
Well, that's a secret. Well, I would say the following. So for hiring, I think people who have digital skills, who are also creative, but also who have a passion for analytics. I would almost bet that when I think about our global team, all the team members have that profile, and they're pretty into beauty too. So that in terms of the profile, I think we not always can, but we certainly try to bring as much work in-house as we can. And then one thing that I think is important is trying to bust our organizational barriers. So I think all of a sudden when we were thinking that we were a small team, as we become better at integrating across education and traditional marketing and some of the other functions, people start in some ways passing the skills of influencer marketing. And I can think of one brand in which we don't actually have an influencer marketer there, but we have people who have had that experience in market and now are working on that brand. So there are ways in which we extend the power of the strength of the organization. And then agencies is a question for me because, I think we still need to, as a new company and as an independent company, we're finding our way on what is the right balance of global and local, which of course is one of the big topics. I know we said short answers, but organization design is a big one. And I think we're still moving forward and evolving, actually constantly looking at how we structure ourselves.
If it's worth a long answer, it's worth a long answer. And Nico, I think this one would be a perfect one for you, so I'm going to squeeze it in because I imagine that a lot of our viewers are in this boat as well. But for a smaller brand entering new markets, how would you suggest, what would you suggest as a strategy for a smaller brand?
So, I mean, there's no one strategy that fits all, but I think if you launch a new brand, you probably have something new to say. You believe that there is a specific expectations or need or innovation that you're going to the market. So the natural starting point with limited budgets especially is really to look for brand affinity. So who are the people out there that will naturally and authentically just probably talk or be willing, be interested into your product, and start by building this core community of fans, learn from them, create that sort of core group from which you will be able to grow and scale when you start financing your organization. I think that will be probably the most natural starting point and a good place to start. And you don't need sophisticated technology to get started, which is good news. Just, it's very accessible.
Some fantastic advice there, thank you. I'm afraid that is actually all we have time for today. And if we didn't get around to your specific question during the webinar, I can see there are a few there. Rest assured that Traackr will answer it digitally very soon. So as mentioned at the start of the webinar, all of today's content will shortly be available on demand if there is anything that you'd like to revisit. And to round off, I think some key takeaway points today have been to experiment, but also to stay close to that data to help you find your way to success. Be sure to set the right key performance indicators and keep an eye on by benchmarking your brand. And finally, make sure your technology supports you and that you have access to data that you need to make those insightful decisions. So with all of that said, I would like to extend a huge thank you to Nico and Traackr, and to Randall and Wella for their insights today. Thank you both. And thank you guys. Lovely. And thank you guys all for joining us too. Goodbye.
Have a good day.
Bye.